Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Jeremy Schumacher. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the Jer in Wellness with Jer. Thanks for checking out my channel today. I'm in my office, which I don't think I've recorded in yet because the lighting's kind of weird. And then I have all these like filters on, and not because I care about how I look or I'm trying to pretend to look nice, but my office is just kind of dark because it has overhead lights, and then like weird stuff happens. Like it doesn't like my corduroy couch over here. I have a really nice orange corduroy couch for those of you who are like, I wonder what office Jeremy does therapy in. And some of you are probably like, I bet he's got a corduroy couch. You're right. I do. So I haven't posted a video in a while. I've been doing other stuff. I've got a bunch of projects that are kind of going, and I have ADHD. So they kind of new things take up a lot of my attention where the old stuff kind of falls by the wayside. So the YouTube channel has been a bit drab. Not that I don't care about it or I'm not interested in doing it, just hasn't been the thing that I've been super focused on. So also I struggle with wanting to talk about things or review things and trying to have some things for enjoyment. So this is one of those things that I picked up for enjoyment, wasn't planning to do a video on, and then was like, I'm going to talk about this anyway. So today we're going to talk about Thor. Check out that sweet Thor shirt. I'm just messing with my video because I'm moving my mic around and stuff. My poor media person. Shout out to Created by Kenny. They're my favorite. They make all my stuff look nice and turn out much better than it should because I'm bad at technology. No, we're going to talk about Thor. We're going to talk about Thor, God of Thunder. This is volume 1. This is Jason Aaron's run on Thor. Jason Aaron is a comic book writer. He's fantastic. I first found his stuff by reading the series Southern Bastards, which is great. Definitely recommend it. I should circle back and do a review of that. I haven't read Southern Bastards in a few years. It was shortly after I read Mr. Miracle and was like just getting back into graphic novels and comic books in general that I found Southern Bastards. It was like, this is tremendous. So yeah, Jason Aaron's pretty well established. He had a long run on Thor, which is what we're going to talk about today. He had a long run on Avengers. He did a run on X-Men and Weapon X, specifically with Wolverine. So he's been doing a bunch of stuff. He's been around for a long time. This is the mid to late 2000s, and especially kicking off with Marvel in like the 2010s. So dude's been around for a while. He's awesome. I think he's a very talented writer. This has a bunch of different artists and letterers with it that I don't know how to pronounce their names, so we'll include that. We'll just have a graphic. Look at that corduroy couch. Really great for a therapy office, really terrible for recording video, in case anyone was curious. So this is the run of Thor. This is Jason Aaron's first run on Thor, and this is the run on Thor that actually was the basis for Thor: Love and Thunder, which is the 4th Thor movie in the MCU, which I saw in theater a while ago and didn't review because it was disappointing. And so I'm going to kind of tie some of that in, but I haven't seen it in long enough to make it relevant. And I have up through like what would be like book 14, or I have the first 2 volumes of the collected trade paperback for this run on Thor. So it's Gore the God Butcher, who's the main villain in Thor 4. And so the run was so well received that they were like, yeah, let's make a movie out of this. And MCU pretty much lifted Thor: Love and Thunder, Thor 4 through Jason Aaron's run. So even Natalie Portman's character being the new Thor, that's Jason Aaron's run. Jason Aaron did a couple different iterations of Thor. So he does this run, and then he's got Jane Foster, who's played by Natalie Portman, as a character, and she picks up the mantle of Thor. And then he also has another run that he did on Thor. So he kind of like 3 separate runs on Thor that were all pretty popular. And so Love and Thunder pretty much just took those and was like, let's make these in a movie because it's a good story. Also, in case those of you are like, Chair's not a very professional YouTuber. No kidding. I can't never tell where to look at my camera. What I really want to talk about is Gore the God Butcher, who's an awesome character. He just goes around killing all the gods in the galaxy. And in the storyline, in the comics, he's building a bomb that's going to blow up time blow up through time to basically kill all the gods that have ever been. It's a very ambitious villain. So there's some time travel and there's some trippy stuff in here, but I think the basis of it is really fascinating. Gore is basically just like an average Joe who's born on a planet that has no name, that nobody remembers the name of. It's not important anywhere. And it's just brutally being burned by the sun. So no nighttime, no shade, no water, no nothing. They're like, night will come, night will come, night will come. We're going to have rain. And Gore's childhood and upbringing is just pretty miserable. Like his mom dies during this drought. His siblings are dying. He survives. He finds a wife. He has kids. His wife dies. His kids die. Like it's just horrific thing after horrific thing. And Gore's just like, where are the gods? And everybody kicks him out as a blasphemer when he basically says like, I don't think speaking poorly of the gods is the problem. I think the gods themselves are the problem. And so it's a really fascinating take, I think, on religion and spirituality. Gore then responds by being like, I'm going to kill all the gods because they weren't there when we needed them, which is, I don't know, almost like a quick bait and switch because it's basically like establishing that like there aren't gods. And that's Gore's take is like, there are no gods. And then his whole premise is to go around and kill the gods. So like, there definitely are gods. They're just no good. So it's an interesting take. I think I've talked about this a little bit before in some of my other videos. My background is marriage and family therapy. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. That's what I've been doing for most of my career. Coming up on 15 years, which makes me feel a little bit older than I actually am. And so that's my background. But my most recent thing, the credentialing that I've picked up most recently and the specialty that I've been doing that's been holding a lot of my attention anyway recently is religious trauma. And so Gore's a really good kind of case study in a fictional setting around religious trauma. I could be doing like Happy Shiny People or whatever other. There's a couple documentaries out right now on like the cult of white evangelicalism. But those are sad because they're based in real life and honestly still a little triggering for me because I was raised evangelical. So instead, we're going to talk about comic books and we're going to talk about Gore and the movie a little bit. So yeah, Gore kind of has what I would call like the angry atheist response. I think when a lot of people deconstruct and deconvert, and definitely I went through this too, where it's like, now that I don't believe what I was taught as a child, I'm mad that anyone believes anything. And I think some people stay there. I don't want to necessarily say it's unhealthy, but Gore has to be a villain in the story. Thor is our hero, and so we need Gore to do something that's like bad. The MCU, and obviously this predates the MCU. Not totally, it existed, but like some of the stories, the big Thanos storyline, right? Like Thanos was not wrong. He just went about responding to what he was saying incorrectly by like killing half the galaxy. Like that makes you a bad guy. Genocide, not a thing we're going to defend. Gore's not necessarily doing genocide; he's doing deicide, which is a fun word, right? Murdering gods. And so his response is just kind of that, like, I'm mad that anyone believes anything. His basic premise is like, these deities, these entities don't deserve worship. They don't deserve a special place. They don't deserve any privilege. They're bad. And so people would be better off not having them messing with their lives, not having them threaten them, not having them promise false rewards and then not being there, not having the hypocrisy. Like he's basically just saying like gods, if these are the gods that we have, then they're not worth worship. And I have a hard time saying he's wrong. Like, right? So the villain in this run on Marvel and the villain in the MCU, Thanos, Gore himself in the played by Christian Bale, who did a phenomenal job in the Thor movie, are again like not wrong. They're just going about it incorrectly. So their response of like over the top violence or genocide is obviously incorrect. Like we would never defend that or say that that's fine. It's kind of the jokey. I think it's kind of an internet meme, maybe an older meme. I'm older though, so I get to an older internet meme around the Empire did nothing wrong, which basically just said like the Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader are the problem in Star Wars, which I've always said, not always, for a long time since I was like an edgy teenager, said Darth Vader's the hero of Star Wars. Luke Skywalker is not. He's a secondary character. Darth Vader's the hero because Darth Vader's the one who overthrows the Emperor. So, but like, blowing up a planet when they blew up Alderaan, that's not okay. That's genocide. Um, planets, there's probably a word that I just am not aware of on it. Um, so, a little bit of jokey, like the Empire did nothing wrong. Thanos was right. I think there's some internet culture, meme type stuff around these things that basically say, like, they're not wrong, but then their response is wrong. The way that they're going about it and responding to these things are incorrect. So that's Gore. And Gore definitely is like a damaged character trauma. Not to like belabor the point, but all the comic books, pretty much every comic book character who's of any sort of note has trauma. That's where all these stories are coming from. So yeah, he has like traumatic loss after traumatic loss after traumatic loss, and he does not come out of it okay. Like he doesn't grow. We're not looking at post-traumatic growth. He stays mad. He holds on to all this anger, and he's like violent. He's killing gods, not just in like a righteous fury, but in a he gets off on torturing them. He enjoys the pain he's inflicting. He promises when he runs into Thor, he promises to like make it take as long as possible. He tortures him for 17 days. So he's a bad guy, not defending that. It's kind of like one of those things where sometimes I think when a villain is given a story that's compelling, it's hard to say like they're wrong, um, but they're wrong in their behaviors. Their actions are incorrect. So maybe their thought process or their emotions aren't wildly hard to disagree with, but their behaviors are very easy to say, yeah, that's unhealthy. So Gore's response is kind of what I see as like the angry atheist phase. I did a little bit of reading up on Jason Aaron. I don't want to say I'm an expert, and I didn't find like an autobiography or anything. Just perusing Wikipedia. He was raised Southern Baptist and then stepped away from the church. So Southern Baptist, for those of you who are not super religious or didn't grow up religious, are unfamiliar, the Southern Baptist Convention is a huge deal in the South. Which is where he's from. I believe he's from Alabama. He's a Crimson Tide fan. That's what makes Southern Bastards so good, I think. The other series he wrote, one of the other series he wrote, is it's so realistic on like the love and worship of football in the South. So that's fun. But yeah, he's from the South. He grew up Southern Baptist and stepped away from the church. I just found a quote of his that basically said his idea on religion and why people believe the things they believe are actually more interesting now as an atheist than as when he was a believer. So raised Southern Baptist, stepped away at some point, self-identifies as an atheist now. So I think Gore is kind of a character who fits a lot of like deconstruction type tropes where you almost go through this phase of being an angry atheist. You're mad at the people who raised you this way or taught you these things. You're mad at the hypocrisy in the church. You're mad at a God who doesn't follow through with the promises because he doesn't exist. So yeah, I think there's a lot of this stuff that happens pretty regularly. I was on the Beyond Atheism podcast, which is basically just about like, okay, you're an atheist now what? Because just identifying as what you're no longer believing isn't a helpful way to identify. So kind of like that, what's that next step? And Gore, the God Butcher character, really never takes that next step. He just kind of stays mad. The gods failed me, so now I'm going to kill all the gods. And that's really the story arc. The movie did a little bit of a different take. It introduces the Necro Sword, his weapon of choice, as an earlier storytelling point. So that's prevalent early in the movie. His character design is different. I don't know if they just didn't want to deal with like prosthetics and the whole makeup thing. I mean, Christian Bale's in makeup for the whole thing anyway, but I don't know if they don't want. He's got some different appendages and stuff. He's a little bit more alien looking in the comics than he was. Much more humanoid in the movie version, but otherwise it's pretty similar. I don't think they made him really weak or anything in the movie. He's not quite overpowered, but I remember being disappointed in the movie. I think Omnipotent City, which is like the city where all the original gods are, and it's kind of ruled by Zeus in the movie. That's not totally what it looks like in the comics. It's just kind of like we see Thor interacting with this librarian who's very sick of seeing Thor and remembers Thor from being a child and not having much respect for libraries. So Omnipotent City definitely gets fleshed out, and based on the movie and the spoilers at the end of the movie with the extra scenes, it seems like they're going to do some stuff with the Greek gods, the Roman gods, Hercules, Zeus, all that. So get more Russell Crowe in the MCU, I guess. Thor's arc in the movie is very different than the comics. So Gore, the God Butcher's kind of just taken. Some things are changed, but not a ton. Thor's storyline is very different. I would say Thor as a character on Jason Aaron's run so far in what I've been reading and reviewing today is so much more interesting than the movie. The movie had that weird space where everybody loved Thor 3 Ragnarok, which is basically like a buddy comedy between Thor and Hulk. And so you still had to have like Thor be funny Thor and like buddy Thor from Ragnarok, and that's not what this Thor is. But there's time travel, so we have three different Thors. We have like young Thor, who's not worthy to hold Mjolnir yet, and so he can't even pick up his hammer. We have Thor the Avenger, who's very much in like the height of his career, what we think of as normal comic book Thor. And then we also have old, like centuries, thousands of years old Thor, who's been fighting Gore the God Butcher for 900 years and has been trapped on Asgard. Has been trapped on Asgard for 900 years. So you have old Thor, who's very much like Odin. He's lost an eye, he's lost an arm, he's old, he's battered, he's got a really long beard. Then we have the classic Thor, the Avenger Thor, and then we have young, early in his career Thor, like 1800s Norway Thor, literally. I think it's Norway. I could check, but I'm not gonna waste your time paging through. I know we could edit it out, but I just like to do these things in one take as best I can. So yeah, the interplay between the three Thors is really where I would say like the growth happens. So Gore doesn't believe in gods, wants to kill all the gods, steps away, stays in that angry atheist phase. The growth and development in the story makes sense to happen for the hero, not the villain, is for Thor. And so the interplay between the three different Thors is really interesting. Where each Thor kind of learned something from every other one. And I really like that from like a mental health perspective and what I think like real growth looks like. I think a lot of times stories, for the sake of simplicity, put growth on like a linear chart. And so it's like, you get better. And that's not always how it works. And so we have like old wise Thor, who's kind of bitter and resentful, learning things from the younger Thors and being reminded of the strength. We have the younger Thors learning from the older Thors and learning some of the wisdom that they've experienced through life experience. So I really liked the interplay there where it was like, here's the perfect Thor. There's one who seems to be like better, more balanced. Kind of like yeah, I don't know. He's the in moderation Thor. He's got the fighting spirit and he's not totally burnt out yet. I'm trying to think of like trying to blank on the fairy tale with the three, the porridge too hot, the bed that's too hard. You know, the little girl who goes and trespasses in the bear's property. You guys know the one. So there's a little bit of that in this storyline with there's one just right Thor, but it's not overbearing, and I don't think it's that simplistic. So I like the interplay. I didn't think time travel was too heavy because they didn't take a lot of time to explain it. I think a lot of times when comics especially, and then comic book movies too, start introducing concepts around time travel, they spend too much time trying to be like, no, this could really happen, and if it really happened, then let's explore all the different iterations of time travel and the fallout from it. And it's like, if it's a sci-fi movie, it's like Interstellar, that's about that, fine. But if it's a comic book movie, if it's Thor, like, we don't need all that. Just give us like a reasonable enough explanation to suspend our disbelief and let us move on at our own pace. So I thought that's kind of what it is. There were like some things where it's like, because of time travel, their memories of this experience will fade. So like, I thought that was a good enough explanation. I prefer that they not get bogged down in the details of time travel. So I liked the story from that perspective. I thought the three different Thors were fine. There was one, like, there's some interaction with Thor and his old man Thor, and his grandchildren being in the story, and them kind of like hitting on younger Thor and then be like, ew, gross, that's our grandpa. But otherwise there wasn't like a ton of like, well, if this happens, then years later this would be different, so they can't exist, and time travel paradoxes. Like, it just skipped a lot of that, because Gore the God Butcher figures out a way to time travel to kill ancient gods, and so it's established in the story without getting bogged down in the story. That's why Gore's bomb is going to work and kill all the gods, is because it can go through time. So It was fine. Um, the God Butcher is like volume one, which gets blurred because I have my filters on, right? Very good. That's a great title for a comic. And then the follow-up is God Bomb. It's like awesome. I'm here for it. So yeah, I thought it was good. The religious trauma specialist in me really liked kind of like this is how some people process the hypocrisy in organized religion or being disappointed by their chosen deity. And I also thought it wasn't super preachy or overbearing. Like Thor goes through a growth process, and like gods don't deserve to be gods. There is no like inherent privilege to being like born a certain way. And I think it kind of tied in with some of the like Thor's chosen Viking culture around things like warriors go to Valhalla. So there's an idea that just by being a certain thing or being born a certain way doesn't give you privilege. You still have to act that way, which I think is true in a lot of the hero stories around the Avengers and stuff like that. Is like earning being a hero. With great power comes great responsibility. Spider-Man, right? So I think a lot of that stuff's in there without being like super overbearing. Thor struggles. He's like an immortal, invincible god. It's one of the immortal, invincible Avengers. So Thor, like being kind of overpowered and being able to have this weapon that kills gods and actually feeds on their bloods, feeds on their blood. I thought was a good way to tell the story. But we also see that Gore grows in power as he kills more gods versus when he faces Thor, very in Thor's young career. So I thought that was good too. I mean, like it never felt super overpowered in a way that like comic book, especially new comic book characters sometimes get introduced where they have to have like all these powers to be an actual threat. It does get into the trope of like all of everything forever, for all eternity, always, the entire galaxy and every universe of all time is going to get destroyed. And I do think comics lean on that trope way too much. I've talked about it before, like something like Guardians of the Galaxy. The first one's this local story and it's really captivating and interesting, and we get pulled into it. And then the second one is like, and all the universe is now at risk. And like, I don't know, maybe that raising the stakes seemed to be a bigger deal at some point in the comic book industry, but I think at this point it's really tropey and leaned on a little bit too much. Um, so there was that aspect of it, but again, I think within the context of the story, it made sense. I think a character like the God Butcher is going to be kind of that level. Part of Thor's distress and all of this is that nobody's reacting to all the gods who are dead because he's following Gore and his trail of deicide, of god murder, and so he's tracking all these murders, and he goes to the library and it's like, why doesn't anyone care? And the librarian's like, I don't know, gods disappear all the time. So I thought that was funny. So there's some like brevity in it. There's some humor in it without being that like look at Thor do a spinning splits kick and be wearing his Ragnarok gear, and he's trying to be like quippy like Iron Man. So I thought it the Thor the issues I had with Love and Thunder not being a particularly good movie weren't here in the comic book. So they took the idea for that movie from this comic run, but I highly recommend the run in the comics over the movie itself. Now, I will say I haven't finished the Jason Aaron run just because I haven't had time to read it all, and tracking them all down in order is somewhat difficult. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but I will say, as a fan of comic books and getting back into them, it's much easier for me to do like trade paperbacks, so more collected editions or even the omnibus editions. But something like Marvel, there's so many different stories running, so it's like you'll get this variant Thor from over here, but then there's this huge event that's going on. So do you read that or do you leave it alone? So I spend a lot of time on my local library's website figuring out like the reading order for the comics and making sure they have all of those, and then kind of going through it that way. So it is Jason Aaron's run, which is what I was interested in reading because I like him as an author. That is a little bit more complicated to track down just because it's a couple different things. Even the titles, so like this is Thor, God of Thunder, but there's a couple different titles and iterations of the comic book run. And I guess I understand, I get it why they do that because of some of the continuity things they have going on for the wider universe, the multiverse of superhero stories that are going on. And like I like going to my local comic shop and picking up whatever's out right now. but it does get complicated. For me specifically with having ADHD, like it's a lot of things to keep organized. And I guess maybe if you came to it naturally or were already in it, it's very easy to keep organized, but coming to it after the fact, I like to binge these stories and read the collect editions so I can work through it really quickly. But then trying to track it all down is kind of clumsy sometimes, which is true for I guess any series. I can think of like book series that's true of too. But yeah, Jason Aaron's run on Thor, particularly the Gore the God Butcher run, is fantastic. I highly recommend it. I think it's got some fun things around religious trauma. I think it's got some fun things around post traumatic growth. So without being like it's just fun. It's a fun read. It's interesting. The action is good. The artistry is awesome. Like I said, we'll throw up the artists and the colorists and pencilers, all the people who go and make comic books look really great. And Jason Aaron is the author who's writing it. So yeah, check out Jason Aaron's run on Thor: God of Thunder. Highly recommend it. Recommend it over the movie Thor: Love and Thunder. Thor 4. I don't know why they didn't lean into Thor 4. It's a fun thing to say. Sounds great. Thor 4. But yeah, so I recommend it over the movie. The movie's fun. I think Christian Bale did a fantastic job as Gore. I just think the character itself wasn't as good in the movie as in the comics. And I think Thor himself, keeping the MCU continuity, made Thor less interesting than he is in the comic books. So yeah, check out Thor: God of Thunder by Jason Aaron. Strong recommend. All right, everybody. Peace.